All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It's so nice to see you all. Welcome to this month's Ask CASA session. We have Hope Rudzinski here with us today, and she is the School and Community Outreach Coordinator in Worcester County's District Attorney Joe Early's office. So I don't know if some of you remember, but we had Susan with us earlier this year in January from the DA's office. She presented on trauma, and Hope is from the same office. I'm pretty sure the same unit as well, correct, Hope?
Yes.
Yeah. So we appreciate you guys over at the DA's office, everything that you guys do, and just the amount of time and effort that you give to CASA. It's just so amazing that you keep giving all of your knowledge and again, your time to us. So I'm going to hand it over to you. Hope is going to share her screen. She has some slides that she's going to present on healthy relationships today. She has asked that we kind of hold questions until the end of the session, but if something pops up into your mind and you feel like you might lose it, then feel free to just throw it into the chat and we can revisit that at the end of the presentation. So Hope, I will hand it over to you. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. And I would just like to say, I really appreciate all of you from CASA having me. I know that it's probably a super busy time of year for all of you, so I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch this presentation. So let me share my screen, and then we'll get started. So I'm Hope, and I'm from the Worcester County DA's office. A little bit of a background about the Worcester County DA's office. So our district attorney is Joseph D. Early. He would always state um, that he would rather prevent a crime than have to solve one. Since he's been elected, he's been doing a lot for the Worcester County community. He would always when we talk about the DA's office, we always want to make sure through our community outreach programs that the children that we present to, the students that we present to, that they're making good choices, and that the victims that come into court, that we're really wanting to make sure that we have justice for them. We only prosecute the criminal cases within the courtroom as well. We have a variety of different outreach prevention presentations that we do show to the students and to youth groups, and then to also parents within Worcester County, besides our healthy and unhealthy relationship presentation, such as we do offer cyber safety and bullying presentations, drug prevention presentations, hazing, distracted driving. Among those presentations, we also have a senior citizen presentation that we do share as well to the senior citizens and to the elder groups in Worcester County. Because we are part of the Worcester County DA's office, we do cover 60 different cities and towns within Worcester County. So with all of those schools and the youth groups, and even like with Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, we cover all of those schools and all of those different groups within all of those different cities and towns. Today, we're going to be learning a little bit about healthy and unhealthy relationships, more so on the domestic violence side, and we're going to be covering abuse, and then really how to navigate endings and how to exit safely if that relationship is unhealthy or abusive. I want to ask if any of you do have questions or even comments. Feel free to put them in the chat. I won't be able to see them while I'm presenting, but we can definitely try to get to those afterwards. So hopefully we'll have time at the end if any of you do have questions. So when we're talking about abuse, really, what does it mean? When we're talking about abuse, that's really when someone causes harm or distress to another person. Especially if that person is maybe in an unhealthy or a borderline abusive relationship. But we also want to know that when we're talking about the harm and distress that might be happening with inside of that relationship, it can really take any forms. We don't just see maybe physical abuse. But a lot of times with people who may be in that unhealthy relationship or that abusive relationship who come through the court, we're seeing many different forms that may have escalated from, maybe emotional or even verbal abuse. And these could also range from maybe when we're talking about verbal and emotional abuse, it could range from maybe disrespect to causing someone physical or mental pain. We're really looking at that physical and mental pain and how that person is controlling that other person. When we're talking about domestic violence, we also refer it to intimate partner violence, so IPV, which is also called dating abuse or in a relationship abuse. And it's really a pattern of behaviors, or often we kind of correlate that with a cycle of abuse, which we're going to be talking about in the next few slides. One partner tries to maintain power and control over another partner in an intimate relationship. We really want to also know that, within all of these domestic violence relationships and, even abusive ones, really that person who is the abuser or who's displaying those unhealthy qualities towards their victim, they're really looking for any way of how to control and manipulate or really try to um, harm that person in a sense repeatedly. For the agenda today, we're just going to be doing a brief introduction, of really of what abuse means, a little bit of domestic violence, the risk factors, and the impact of what abuse can have on others. Different types of abuse, what the 10 signs of a healthy and then the 10 signs of an unhealthy relationship look like, and really what signs you can look for. The coping with unhealthy behaviors and abuse, boundaries, not only how to communicate those properly, but also how to enforce those. Who else is affected? So not just with the intimate, maybe dating violence that happens in partnerships or relationships, but we're also looking at, how children are affected, how pets are affected. Social media versus relationships, really correlating to digital abuse, empowering survivors, navigating endings with breakups, and then of course at the end, we always want to make sure that we have a safety plan set in place for these survivors that are leaving that abusive relationship, and then resources as well. So when we talk about abuse, it is not always physical. It can be mental and emotional as well. So when we hear the word abuse, things that may come to mind is, maybe that person is suffering from, a black eye or physical bruises, but it's much more than that. Abuse can really come in any type of form. It can really start off as mental and emotional, especially if maybe if someone doesn't tell another person or even a trusted adult about that abuse, it tends to escalate, which is really sad in a sense, but, we really want to make sure that, if it starts off as mental or emotional, we want to recognize those signs and tell someone about that. That's why it's really, really important that we want to be reporting these types of abuses when they do happen before it escalates. Because when we talk about physical abuse, that can really be a life or death situation for that person. So I mentioned the cycle of abuse earlier on in this presentation, but we're really looking at that pattern or that repeated behavior. So for number one, we have that the tensions build. So maybe the abuser creates tension and the survivor's stress builds. Maybe number two, there was an incident where the abuser lashes out through physical, verbal, or psychological, or even sexual abuse. So when we're talking about sexual abuse, that kind of also tends to go with physical abuse. But any tactic that they do to dominate the survivor, again, we're talking about that power and control. Maybe when we look at number three, the abuser maybe tries to apologize. They're being sympathetic to that victim. They make excuses or even attempts to, really make up for their actions or how they acted. Gaslighting, that is a very common things that happen, within these domestic violence relationships, especially if, for example, maybe something happened where the victim was being friendly towards another person and they didn't like that, and then the tension built. Maybe they lashed out in a sense where there was physical abuse, and now, even though it really wasn't that big of a deal for that person to talk to their friend or toward this person, people who are the abuser, again, they want to be in control. They want to really harm that person. And then they kind of want the other person to sympathize with them. So that's when the gaslighting tends to come in, or maybe nothing happened. They like to go back to normal and the cycle repeats. The last cycle is the calm, where maybe things seem peaceful. Maybe that victim thinks that the abuser will change their behavior, that they really kind of try to fix that person. But often this doesn't really last long before the cycle starts over. And this cycle can really keep continuing until that person exit that relationship. So identifying abuse towards others, not only are we looking at our own personal relationships, but we also want to make sure if, we're going into the home and we're seeing all of these different types of families and children, and even if maybe you go into the home and, you're seeing a person who's in an intimate partner relationship with someone, or, maybe they're dating, or maybe even they're married to someone in the home. These are some of the things that we can really try to identify, and even within our own lives as well. But we want to make sure that these are just kind of some examples, of how you can help identify that. Their partner puts them down in front of people. Maybe they're constantly worried about making their partner angry. They make excuses for their partner's behavior. Their partner is extremely jealous or possessive. Again, they will probably not let them hang out with certain people. Maybe they also monitor their social media and who they talk to. They have unexplained marks or injuries, especially if maybe they're bruises. Maybe they try to cover it up with makeup as well. They've stopped spending time with friends and family, or they're depressed and anxious, and you notice a lot of different changes in their personality. Maybe they're isolating themselves. Maybe they're not eating enough. Maybe they try to make excuses for that unhealthy behavior. So for the risk factors and the impact of violence, and really where it is stemming from. Abuse is a learned behavior. When I talk about it being learned, some people may even witness it in their own families growing up, and then they think that that behavior is normalized, and they think that that's how a relationship is supposed to be. But it doesn't have to be. We really want to make sure that others learn. Maybe they also learn it from friends, maybe from online for social media, but we also kind of want to take in account that no matter where they develop these behaviors, those who may even commit these unhealthy behaviors or abusive acts, it's really a choice. So they may choose to do so or they choose not to do it. But we want to make sure that, it is a learned behavior, but again, it's really up to them if they're going to be abusive towards someone and they have a choice to display that or to not. Outside factors such as substance use can escalate abuse. Such as maybe if that person is on drugs or alcohol, maybe they're misusing different substances, that can a lot of the times escalate abuse, especially if that's involved in the relationship. We also have ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences that I'll be talking about in the next slide. And then abusive partners often redirect blame and responsibility from themselves to their partner. Again, it's about that control wheel where we're seeing, they want the power, they want to manipulate that person. And, if something happens, for example, maybe it's gaslighting, maybe, it's something that really did happen in that relationship. And even if it was bad, and even if it wasn't the victim's fault, and per se, maybe it was the abuser's fault, um, then the abuser will oftentimes direct that towards the victim and act like it's their fault. So when we're talking about ACEs, again, it's adverse childhood experiences. But that's really if a child is experiencing a lot of trauma or abuse in their childhood or at home. So we're really talking about that different types of trauma. And there's a lot of different types of trauma that that child can go through, such as maybe there's substance use in the home, maybe there's alcohol involved, maybe there's sexual abuse, physical abuse. It could even be emotional and verbal abuse as well. But again, all of these traumas are different, but they may include household dysfunctions, whether it's not only abuse, such as we just talked about, but it could also be neglect, especially if maybe that parent is neglecting their child. Almost two-thirds of adults have had at least one ACE, in their lifetime, but a majority, we do see that there's more than two ACEs that someone has. And that ACEs can cause toxic stress and really increase risks for different infections as well. And that ACEs are only part of a person's story. You can't change your past. So things in the past might have happened that were very traumatic to you, or even when you're going into the different types of homes that you're going into, that family may have had something happen in the past to them or that person, but we really want to make sure that we're working on how to help them now. But their present day actions can really affect how your story moves forward into the future. We want to make sure that they're cultivating healthy relationships, that they have someone to talk to, that they have a trusted adult. We really want to make sure that we're focusing on the present and we're not being defined by our past. Because if something very traumatic happens to you in the past, yes, that did happen. And, but we really want to make sure that that's not completely defining you as a person. We want to make sure that your voice is being heard and we want to make sure that we help that person move forward. So when we're talking about ACEs with resilience, is that we really want to make sure that when that person is kind of moving forward, these are some goals that they can take. So we want to make sure that they're goal setting with the hopes of having realistic expectations, that their self-esteem goes up. When we're talking about all of these different steps, we also want to make sure that we're talking about self-care. So when we talk about self-care, that is utilizing the resources around you to be a better self. Whether it's maybe you have to take a walk after work for your mental health. Maybe if something happens within your romantic or even friendship relationship, maybe something happened that really made you upset. Maybe you need to talk to a trusted adult about that. So we're really wanting to make sure that we utilize those resources. Whether it's maybe, the ability to recognize your own emotions and how they affect others. So we really want to make sure that we kind of follow some of these steps and know that to lean on someone if you need help and to really support that person who's going through that. Because we really want to support that person who's going through, whether it maybe be an unhealthy relationship, maybe it's trauma, because that really wasn't easy for them to go through that. They had to face a lot to go through that. So if we have support for them and to make sure that we have resources that they can utilize, that's the most important thing. So when we're talking about the different types of ACEs and trauma, it really leads me to the different types of abuse and what they may look like. So the one that we have that is probably the most common that we hear about is physical abuse. So when I say physical abuse, this is infliction of bodily harm or injury upon an individual within a relationship. So this really goes a lot with different violent behaviors, but the most violent behaviors that you may come across may be if the person is maybe punching that person, maybe they're slapping that person, maybe it also can go to the effect of strangulation, or maybe even the use of weapons. So when we're talking about physical abuse, yes, it is very scary for that individual, but when we're talking about strangulation, that is probably the one of the most common types of abuse that we deal with at the DA's office for when victims come through court. When we're talking about strangulation, sometimes we will have different individuals that may be like, oh, well, I was choked, or this person choked me. But, really the difference between the two is that, when we think of choking, it's maybe you choked on a piece of food. Maybe you choked on something, whereas when we're talking about strangulation, that is the act of that person who is the abuser, that is really displaying all of those unhealthy behaviors. And, when we talk about strangulation, that is the act of them, forcing themselves on to you and also causing harm. So maybe they're inflicting pain upon you and, um, cutting off all of your airways so you can't breathe. And that can also be a life or death situation for that person. A lot of times, some of the aftermath effect of that could be maybe the person, survives that incident of being strangulated, but that could be where that person has brain damage from that. There's a lot of also psychological and physical effects that can happen from that person afterwards, after they've been through that. So some of these signs that you can look out for is name calling or even demeaning comments, especially if that person is maybe putting you down in a sense. Someone that seems too good to be true.
Oh. Oh. Opens after going in.
Hi, guys. We will give her a second. I think she was working from home today, so maybe a little interruption.
At first, I thought it sounded like DA Early.
Yeah. I know, usually
He'd come in and wave.
yeah. Usually he does pop on for the training calls that they do for us, so I was wondering if he was gonna make an appearance or not.
Sorry about that. That was just a family member, so I apologize for that.
That's okay.
Um,
We were
okay,
joking
so
that it might have been DA Joe popping around.
oh no. I wish though. So when we're going back to the signs of what that may look like, that could be frequent phone calls or texts, especially if maybe that person is spamming that person. They could also threaten to harm to kill you. And especially in a lot of these different types of relationships, we do often see that that person might be harming your pet or even a family member, not only to really control that person, in a sense, but also use that against you. Blames you for all of the abusive behavior, does not take responsibility for their actions, and then prevents you from spending time with family or friends, and then they even enjoy hobbies or other activities, so they're really isolating you from that. And when we look at the different types of abuse, that they really go on to great lengths to control their victim, their interactions in their everyday life, and common indicators of abuse, may include these things that we just covered. So some of the indicators that you can look for, knowing if someone can care about, when we're really talking about the indicators, the different situations can be different, but here are some common warning signs. So a little bit different, than when we're seeing some of the signs. Would look a little bit different. So signs are more so things that maybe we hear or even see. We're talking about the indicators. Yes, we can still see these, but they're more so warning signs in a sense. So these may include unexplained or inappropriately explained injuries, such as maybe cuts or scratches to the mouth, lips, gums, or eyes, bruising to the face, torso, arms, back, maybe the buttocks, thighs, in various stages of healing. They could also be collections of bruises that form regular patterns, which correspond to the shape of an object. Again, when we were talking about strangulation before, that could maybe be, those person's hands. Maybe they're also, different types of objects such as a rope. Maybe they're an appliance, especially if that person is using an object. Burns on unlikely areas of the body, such as immersion burns, rope burns, burns from an electrical appliance. And again, these are mainly just examples. They could be a lot more, but especially you can tell if that person flinches at any type of physical contact. That's one of the main indicators. Then we have emotional abuse. So a lot of times we kind of group verbal and then emotional abuse together. So that could be a range of words or behaviors used to manipulate, intimidate, and maintain power and control over someone that really coincides with emotional abuse. So some of the signs is that maybe you feel like you walk on eggshells around the other person, that you can not share things about yourself with them out of fear, or you're afraid to go in public with them. You feel threatened, that you constantly are being put down by that person, maybe you question your worth. This is where gaslighting comes in again as well. Maybe they're accusing you of something that happened, or maybe something that didn't happen when that situation did happen. They yell at you, but then they suggest that you are overly sensitive or that you don't have a sense of humor. Again, they are putting you down in a sense. They overact to small problems and then blame you for resulting argument. And then they hide this verbal abuse when you are around other people, but act completely different when you are all alone. So some of the indicators that you can look for are blaming, condensation disguised as humor, criticism, gaslighting, humiliation, judging and name-calling, manipulation, threats, and then also withholding. So I'm not going to go over all of these, but one of the main ones that we do see a lot is that person who's gaslighting that other person. It could also be threats, and then if that person might be withholding from that other person, so such as maybe they're withholding what that other person can say. Maybe they're also withholding what that other person can do as well. So while we're talking about, some of the different types of abuse, we want to make sure that we're taking a note of the aftermath and how that victim is going to deal with that. Maybe they're social withdrawing, so maybe they're isolating, they have low self-esteem, they have fear, they're adapting to other people's expectations, they're losing your identity, dependence or codependence. They also, maybe they lose their voice and their power, they have shame, there's physical changes, and there's also psychological symptoms. So some of the safety planning that you can do, especially with emotional abuse, is that we really want to make sure that you're seeking out support, that you identify and work towards different goals, that you create a peaceful space, and that you remind yourself of your worth. The last type of abuse that we're going to be covering is financial abuse. So what financial abuse is that, again, it's all these types of abuse are surrounded by power and control, but it's really if that partner controls that other partner's finances or their ability to provide for themselves or for their family for a job. So again, we're having that power and control, that manipulation tactic. But when we're looking at financial abuse, some examples of what that may look like is maybe that person is damaging that person's credit by maybe they're spending a lot, maybe they're not purposely paying bills. Maybe they restrict your access to financial resources. There might be a joint bank account. Maybe that person or that your partner monitors your spending and yells at you for every purchase. Again, we have that cycle. So maybe something happens and, that person, you both get in an argument, whether it's physical, verbal, or emotional, because of this. And then that person tries to apologize. And then it keeps on being that cycle. Your partner affects your ability to work, and then your partner takes money earned from you and controls where you spent it. And when we talk about maybe even going to work, that person may be causing you to consistently be late or preventing you from going to work on some days, leading to potential firing of that individual. So some safety planning, especially with someone who's going through financial abuse. We really want to make sure that you're ensuring them that they have their own financial assets. That maybe you have to put a two-factor authentication on your own banking information or your credit cards. That you talk to a trusted friend or a family member who can keep money for you or receive public assistance for you. That maybe you hide financial documents in a safe place, such as a safety deposit box, and that you make a list of things that you own together. So the next topic that we're going to be covering is the 10 signs of what a healthy relationship looks like and the 10 signs of what an unhealthy relationship looks like. And these are just some signs that you can look for. But within a healthy relationship, there's going to be trust, honesty, independence, respect, equality, kindness, healthy conflict, comfortable pace, and taking responsibility for your actions. And then, of course, we really want to make sure that it's going to be fun for all of you. But the main thing with healthy relationships is that, 24/7, it may not be all of these signs. There's going to be some disagreements, there's going to be some arguments. Maybe you might need a break from that person, and that's okay. But, it's really on how you move forward with that person, in the future. So we really just want to make sure that within that relationship that they don't have all of these signs. When we're talking about the unhealthy signs, we really don't want to have them have all of those signs, but, for the most part in that relationship, they should be having all of the healthy signs. But again, it is okay if there's a few arguments, but we really want to make sure that we know the 10 signs of the healthy relationships. So I did see that Sky raised her hand, but if you have any questions or comments, please put it in the chat, and then hopefully we will go over those towards the end. So when we're talking about the unhealthy relationships, these are the 10 signs that you can look for. We have intensity, possessiveness, deflecting responsibility, manipulation, isolating, especially if that person is maybe isolating you from a group or even your friends or family. They're sabotaging, they're belittling you in a sense, which means that they're putting you down. They're guilting you. There's volatility and betrayal. So when we're talking about guilting, maybe they are guilting you for not hanging out with them that day. And when that really starts to repeat and we have that cycle, that's really when it becomes negative. Nobody should be guilting you for not spending time with them. There's also volatility. So we do have when that relationship looks like a roller coaster. So there's a lot of ups and downs, but there's more downs than there is ups. And betrayal, we really associate that with cheating, especially if maybe you've had enforced boundaries with your partner beforehand, which leads me to boundaries. So when we're talking about boundaries, we really want to make sure that, the person who's setting that boundary is really stating a clear personal limit, and that people should not be crossing that different boundary. It really protects that person's energy, the time that they put into that person's body, and it's also a form of self-expression. when we look at this picture here, we're really looking at how that person has an active boundary, and that person might be wanting to overstep that. But that person clearly respects that boundary and is not, overstepping that. Then we have stonewalling, which is when maybe you don't have an active boundary, but you try to avoid all of that with maybe being silent, with maybe being deflective or even defensive in that state where maybe you're not telling the person why you have this boundary, what that looks like. So we really want to make sure that it's very important that we have boundaries with other people. So things we can set boundaries with could be your body, emotions, your work, time, energy, space, who you communicate with. And then people that we should be actively setting these boundaries with could be your partners, parents, friends, even your teachers and students, your employers, strangers as well. But really the difference between the two is that when we're setting those active boundaries with people, that should be an active choice. We really want to make sure that you're choosing to have those boundaries with that person, but you should be doing that, all the time. That, when we talk about what we put our emotions and our work into, that's really when we can kind of choose a little bit. But, when it really comes to people, we should be actively having those boundaries and making them clear with that person. How we can properly communicate these boundaries is that step one, we always want to make sure that we're describing the situation and the feelings of that result using I statements. For example, I feel hurt when you're spending a lot of time on your phone while we're on a date. Step two, express your desired result. So maybe you also say that you're hurt, but we want to make sure that you also explain why. That I enjoy spending quality time together, so I'm hoping you can spend a little less time on your phone when we're out. And then number three, state the outcomes. So now you've already described the I statement, you've expressed your desired result and what you want to get out of that situation, but we want to make sure that you also put both people in that perspective and, really put together an outcome. So I'll help me to feel more appreciated and cared for, which will also help me be more connected and intimate with you, and really be there for you. So, we really want to make sure that we understand how to properly communicate these boundaries. When we're looking at our emotions and how our body may feel, we want to make sure that we're also looking at how we're feeling. So this, is the feelings wheel. And this really teaches you, maybe you are angry in that situation, but maybe you're also humiliated. Maybe you're also aggressive. Maybe you're frustrated. Maybe you're distant. So there's a lot of other emotions that kind of couple up with these different types of feelings that you are feeling in that exact moment. So we really just want to make sure that you understand that yes, you may be angry, but why? We really want to make sure that we look for that why before we act on it. And yes, maybe you're feeling angry, but maybe you're also fearing, maybe sad. Maybe there's a little bit of, you're feeling a little bit down in a sense, so we're looking at all those other ranges of emotions than just the one that you're feeling in that exact moment. So how to help, set healthy boundaries. We want to figure out what you want from your relationship and what you want from your life in general. We want to come up with boundaries based on those wants and be clear when expressing your boundary and the consequences for breaking them. So now, we went over boundaries, what they look like, emotions, and how to really communicate those. Lastly, we want to be enforcing those boundaries with that person within that relationship. Step one, we want to make sure that we're identifying potential violations. So if someone violates your boundaries or really does not have respect for you, we really want to make sure that there's consequences. That you want to reflect on what are some ways that someone might overstep your boundary, maybe what you've established. We want to prepare responses for those violations. And then step three, we want to make sure that there's consequences to those actions. So when we talk about boundaries, this leads me to social media versus relationships and what that may look like. So in a DV or even an abusive relationship, we're really looking at that those different types of abuse can also happen online. It can be digital abuse. So these are some of the signs that that person might be experiencing digital abuse, that they maybe look through your phone constantly, that they send you a massive number of texts, maybe they threaten to hurt you. Also this next one might be a little bit more common, but it does require that person, maybe their GPS tracking on their phone. And that really is one of the main types of digital abuse that we do see within these relationships, which is very scary in a sense. Nobody should have your location unless, you want them to have your location. But, in this sense, in these unhealthy abusive relationships, a lot of the times they will kind of take that and have advantage of that. And again, it's all about control, it's all about power and really taking over that person who is the victim. So wanting to know their location 24/7, where they are, and that can really be scary, if you're in that situation. That they tell you who you can not and who you can be friends with, that they demand to have your passwords, that they send you unwanted explicit photos or videos, and they pressure you to take and send explicit videos, or even photos of yourself, which also could be classified as revenge porn, especially if maybe they're looking for something in exchange. So when we're talking about revenge porn, and when we're talking about even the different types of inappropriate and negative images. We do have a Massachusetts state law regarding the sending and receiving of inappropriate pictures and videos. And mainly, we do have different types of laws for, if maybe someone violated this when they're above the age of 18, but this is mainly for children and young adults who are under the age of 18. So why it is called dissemination of child pornography is because they are minors, so that's why it is considered child pornography. When I talk about dissemination and then possession, dissemination is the sending and the forwarding, and also the receiving of those inappropriate pictures or videos. When we have possession, that is if that person has it on their phone. Both of those people who will be sending that around and then also have it on their device will be going to court and will be getting in trouble. So it's not just the person who's actively sending it. Some of the legal consequences could be Department of Youth Services commitment until they're 18 years old, and then also registered as a sex offender for life, and that usually will stay on their records. So that's very hard to get a job. That's very hard to, get into college, let alone a 2-year community college. So, we really, really want to make sure that, this might be happening, but we want to make sure that we understand that there's legal consequences, if they're ever doing negative things online, especially sending inappropriate pictures. And it's especially important if they're minors. So when we're really talking about abuse, who else is affected? So it's not just the victim within that unhealthy or abusive relationship, but it really impacts the entire family. So we have that about 30 to 60% of intimate partner violence cases also include child abuse. About 275 million children are currently exposed to domestic violence worldwide. About every 12 seconds, a woman is physically abused by her intimate partner. One in 6 to 7 men, and then 1 in 4 women will be a victim of domestic abuse in their lifetime. A gun in a home with a previous domestic violence assault increases the risk of murder to the victim by 20 times. As many as 324,000 women each year experience intimate partner violence during their pregnancy. Battering, so really physical abuse, is the single largest cause of injury to a woman in the United States over stealing, even if there's car accidents, rape, combined. When we're talking about children in the home, about 30% to 60% of abusers within the household abuse the children they're living with. 17.9% of children have been exposed to physical intimate partner violence in their lifetime, with about 13.6 million children. So that's a lot of children when we think about it. Approximately 3,500 to 4,000 children witness fatal family violence each year in the US alone. So this slide's very important. All of these slides are, but this slide, when we talk about when a child discloses abuse, you may find yourself when you go into the homes, what that may look like. We really want to make sure that we stay calm, we listen to them, and that we're actively reporting what they tell us. The different types of disclosures may look like. Maybe they're direct, maybe they're indirect. Most will be indirect, so maybe they're not sharing with you right away, but they could also share through using other people as an example to redirect, such as saying, and these are only examples, but sometimes my dad keeps me up at night, or I have a cousin who's being hurt, or my friend told me, so and so. So, we really want to make sure that, we understand that they might be indirect, where maybe they're using someone else's experience as their own, or maybe they're telling a story that happened, which is true, that happened to someone else, but they're kind of filtering in that scenario of what happened to them. So we really want to make sure that we, kind of take that for in an account. But, I know that Jordan did say that most of the children who do come to you, the volunteers, that they are direct, which is very good. So we really want to make sure that they're comfortable with you, that they feel safe with you, and that they have a trusted adult. We're also looking at pets in the home. So 88% of the pets living in households with domestic abuse are either abused or killed. About 25% of the survivors return because the abuser is using their pet to get the person back. About 57% of the survivors had a pet killed by their abuser. Domestic violence impacts the pets too. The sad truth is that domestic violence and animal abuse frequently occurs simultaneously. That, if maybe the victim is being abused, it's most likely that the pet is being abused as well. 70% say that the abuser threatened or harmed or even killed the pet. 65% were unable to escape because they are concerned about what will happen to their pets when they leave. And that is one of the main concerns that we do deal with, and that the abusers will also hurt pets, and that they use more forms of violence and demonstrate, a greater use of controlling behavior. So, if they're maybe not harming their victim within this relationship, like if there's not a lot of physical abuse being made towards that victim, in a sense, they will use that on the pets, to make them, in a sense, get what they want out of the victim. So some red flags of what you can look for: that they threaten to get rid of your pet. Maybe they warn that they would, maybe warn you that if you try to leave, they deliberately harm or scare the pet to intimidate you or your children. Maybe they kick or beat or even throws different objects at the pet. That they refuse to let you spend money on the pet, socialize, or even provide vet care, especially if that animal is sick. That they take the pet and refuses to grant custody of the pet as well, especially if it maybe becomes a court decision. So throughout this presentation, we always want to make sure that we're empowering the survivor, especially that person who is the victim in that case. So if that person, especially when they're going to court, we always want to make sure that we're there for them, that we support them, that we're actively reporting, that we always let the survivor make their own decision at the end of the day. That's very, very important. We want to make sure that we're listening to and believing the victim, that we're being patient with the recovery process, and that we remind them that it's not their fault. Because most of the time when we have victims that has experienced domestic violence, they try to blame themselves. That we want to make sure that we're assuring the victim that although feeling guilt is normal, what happened to them is never their fault. And maybe you're in that situation. Maybe you find that it's very difficult to say different things, but here's really what to say if you ever find yourself in that situation. I'm sorry that this happened to you. I believe you. It's not your fault. Thank you for telling me. I'm here for you if you need to talk. You did what you could do to survive, and that's enough. What can I do to help? So here's what not to say if you're ever in that situation. Maybe you're blaming them in a sense. Maybe you're belittling them in a sense and kind of making them feel small, or diminishing the experiences that happened to them. So why didn't you fight back, scream, run away, or stop drinking, especially if there is alcohol involved? How much were you drinking? What were you wearing? So maybe they're blaming the type of clothing, especially if maybe there was sexual assault involved, maybe there was rape involved. They're blaming what they wore a cause for that happening. If it was me, I would have, or I don't believe you. It's not a big deal. It happens to a lot of people. It's been so long. Get over it. So getting help for the oppressor, so this is also important as well, because we really want to make sure that that person who's displaying these unhealthy qualities and behaviors, that we get help for them, especially if they're the abuser themselves. So we want to make sure that we're reporting, that we recognize the unhealthy behaviors, that maybe you have to have a sit down conversation with that person. We know to refer them to have resources readily available for them, that abusive behavior can stem from several different risk factors. Again, we talked about the risk factors before. Most of the times though, people who are maybe have experienced trauma or abuse, growing up as a child, they tend to come out of those situations most likely most of the time, having very healthy, loving relationships. But again, abuse is learned, but it's also a choice, so that person can still be abusive, especially if maybe they were affected from that as a child. But again, it can really stem from different risk factors, or maybe they're seeing different videos online. Maybe they're learning that from different people. And only if it is safe to do so, talk to them about their behavior. So signs an abuser is making changes, that maybe they're admitting fully to what they have done, that they're not making excuses or blaming others for their behaviors. They're accepting consequences for their actions, and they're really accepting that their relationship is over if that is the partner's request. Which leads me to navigating endings, especially with breakups. But for unhealthy breakups, the breakup may have no warning signs. Maybe there's no agreement with the circumstances of the breakup. Could end through social media or by text. There's ghosting, stalking, and gaslighting involved. Stalking is really if that person is maybe showing up to your place of work unwanted. It's really to cause a lot of distress and fear within that victim. Ghosting is really when if that person cuts off all ties and communication with that person, and really, you don't have any closure, you get no answer out of that. Then we have gaslighting, which we went over before. Gaslighting, these are some examples of gaslighting, but gaslighting is really, if maybe something happened in that relationship, that abuser or even that person who's displaying those unhealthy qualities, they're really, if that situation happened, they're making you kind of seem crazy that that didn't happen when that situation really did. Some of the examples could be maybe they're making you question reality. They're convincing you that the problem isn't a problem. It's a reverse victim offender. So maybe they're blaming what happened on you, instead of themselves, and then lying when even there is proof. Usually we kind of correlate that with social media, and then that they project their own behavior on you, and that they're telling you that you're imagining things, or for example, maybe they call you crazy as well. So for healthy breakups, they mutually respect each other's decision. If maybe you just take a break, so it's not maybe an official breakup, such as needing space, you should establish your different boundaries beforehand. For example, maybe that's how often you'll communicate, how often you'll see each other, or even discussing dating other people or not. So lastly, we really want to make sure that we create a safety plan for that survivor. So when I talk about a safety plan, that is a personalized, practical plan to really improve your safety while experiencing that abuse. So maybe you're preparing to leave an abusive situation, or even after you leave. We really want to make sure that there is steps set in place for you to take if you ever want to exit that safely. So these safety plans may include obtaining a new cell phone, changing a routine, because a lot of times if that person knows your routine, they know what to expect. changing locks and installing security systems, creating a plan for where to go if that incident should occur, or maybe even calling a domestic violence crisis center. If a victim is planning to leave, here are some things to really consider. Putting aside a bag with money, a change of clothes, maybe identification, medication, anything you really need. Putting aside important documents like birth certificates or even your social security cards, because again, especially that's super important. Even if the person might be experiencing financial abuse, it's very important to have all of those with you, so they can't control and take advantage of that. So on the National Domestic Violence Hotline, on their website, they do have an interactive guide to safety planning that you can actually go through, if that person is, or even if that survivor is experiencing abuse. So we'll go through the introduction, what that may look like, the basics, so whom do you live with, the zip code of where you live, what if you maybe you go to school, what that may look like, the type of job you have, the type of partner, and then even if children are involved in your emotional needs. A safety plan is really a set of actions that can help that person. So we really, really want to make sure that that person gets the help that they need. And then lastly, this is one of the, at-home signals for help if that person is maybe experiencing domestic violence. But these are what to look for. So especially if maybe that person has a palm to the camera and then they maybe tuck the thumb back and then they trap the thumb. We really want to make sure that we reach out to them safely, of course, only if it's really safe to do so, and for what they need, and we want to make sure that we find services for them. But if you think that it's a very unsafe situation, if maybe you have this feeling in your gut that, oh, this is not okay, we want to make sure that you call 911. They're there to help. But this I thought was a very interesting thing to put in. So there is signals that we can use, especially if someone is under distress of domestic violence and even dating violence abuse. So we really want to make sure that we know the signal, and even if we have to practice that with someone, but we really want to make sure that we know the signal so we can get help for that person. So whatever you're feeling now will not last forever. It is normal to miss that person after the relationship ends, even if they have been abusive. But we want to make sure that we understand, that we recognize those unhealthy behaviors, that we recognize what abuse is, what it can maybe stem from, and that you're worth way more than going through all of those different types of abuse. We want to make sure that you recognize your worth in that you do have a voice and that needs to be heard. It can't be suppressed by that person who's trying to control you, for whatever reason. We really just want to make sure that they know that, and that it is normal to miss that person. There may have even good times in that relationship, but if the majority is those 10 unhealthy signs that we covered, if it's even some of the examples that we talked about today, we want to make sure that they can exit that relationship safely, and have people to lean on and have support for them. I know that we have about 5 more minutes, but I would just like to say thank you to all of you, for being on this call. I really appreciate you for being on this training. I hope that you learned something, and I hope that, you can really bring this back to CASA, and when maybe go into the homes, when you deal with children, when you deal with different people who might be experiencing abuse, or even in the homes that are having different types of relationships, that you can really put this to good use and really help them. And yeah, and so thank you. And I also apologize for that short interruption. But thank you. So I will take any questions if any of you have those right now. But I did see that Sky posted a question, so I'll answer hers really quick. But she said that just wondering about when a seemingly healthy relationship tips to unhealthy territory, how can kids learn to recognize that? Yeah, so we actually do have a younger presentation for middle school and high school students that we do talk about the unhealthy signs. But I would say maybe talk to them about the different 10 signs that we talked about today. The One Love Foundation, they're based out of Boston, and they have amazing resources. They have a lot of great educational tools for children, young adults, specifically teens, that are suffering from dating violence. And they have a lot of good like videos to go through what gaslighting looks like, more than just me explaining it. They do have like real life examples and videos, because they do make most of their videos with the people that work there. So they have a lot of great educational tools if you want to maybe check that out. But all relationship has a mix. And yes, that is true that, in any type of relationship, there may be some negative qualities, but usually, if you maybe have that gut feeling where maybe about more than 50% of time that it's negative, then we really want to make sure that we exit that relationship. Especially if maybe you don't feel okay yourself with that person, if you don't feel safe, if maybe you're questioning that relationship, if maybe they're talking down to you in a sense. Talking down to you, so really like the emotional abuse is probably one of the more prevalent types of abuse that we do see rather in teen relationships, where that person may be gaslighting them, and that they're talking down to them in a sense, or even in front of other people, maybe their friends or even other people at school. And thank you so much, Glorianne, for putting one love in there. I appreciate that.
We'll put it on our community resource guide too. I mean, hope this is just amazing, because
Yeah,
cases are loaded with it. I won't interrupt the question part, but our cases are loaded with it. One of the juvenile judges in particular makes it his mission to learn as much as he can about it and handle the cases. Ultimately, he has to decide what's best for the children, but he really tries to navigate through each case, and with the domestic violence and try and make it so it can be a better ending, but amazing.
Thank you.
yes, so thank you so much. This was, I mean, I was messaging separately with Glory and Jim, and we were all just saying how wonderful this information is to have as a resource for volunteers, working their casework, but also just personal life. I mean, you can never be learning enough about this topic just because it's through and through, and that's heartbreaking.
And they go
So,
into the homes and they want to be able to interact with
yeah,
these children or families that are going in the throes of it, and knowing what to say and knowing how to
yeah,
be a comforting source is,
yeah.
important to all of us.
And also, we have a lot of cases coming in, especially recently, that are CRAs or adolescents. So children that are starting to transition to a point where they want to start their own relationships with people that they meet in school, or, so on and so forth. So again, you guys as advocates going into those own homes, building rapport with children, it's just helpful to have these resources available. So I really, really appreciate your time and all of your knowledge that you've shared with us.
No, thank you. And I would just like to say thank you to all of you. If you need any resources from me, I know that Jordan and I think Lorianne has my email, but just in case if any of you need it, I'll put it in the chat really quickly. We also have resources for students. So we give a lot of our different prevention presentations to students around Worcester County. And then we also do, like I said before, like Girl Scout groups, all of that. So if any of you need any different prevention presentations, if maybe you have children that go into the school, we could be a resource for that. And we also offer resource tables. So if you have any events, or if you're involved with anything, we do offer different resources too that we can pass out to the community. And we have a lot of different prevention resources too that we do offer.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Fran, I see you have.
Yes, yes. So that comment was great. So there was a comment about financial abuse, and that they have seen that the abuser is controlling the health insurance or preventing access. Yeah. That's a great point to be made because they can also do that as well, especially if they have control over all of the person's financial aspects.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. I really appreciate it. I want to remind everyone on this call that we do have our YouTube channel that has all of the recordings from our Ask CASA session. So if you ever want to refer back to this presentation or any of the others, you can feel free to look there. I'm going to drop that in the chat right now. I'm also just going to throw out a very quick reminder, and we'll drop it in the chat as well, that we have officially launched our backpack drive for this year. So any advocates on here, if you haven't filled out your form to reserve backpacks, make sure you do that so that we can have all of our youth that we're assigned to prep to go back to school in the fall. All right. Thank you all again, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hope. I'll see you at the next table event.